What is going on, you guys? It's your boy 3, and today I'm going to talk about something really cool. So, my last video that I made was basically about how I'm going to be beginning a new format for custom cards, which is just a breath of fresh air, kind of like a nice bit of respite from the current format. And so, I was on the phone for a few hours with one of my closest brothers last night, and we were talking about how custom format's going to be and things that we're going to integrate to make it more fun and enjoyable. And he had the bright idea. He said, why don't you make custom hand traps so that we can play different hand traps for what we currently have? And we really, when I say you guys, we really cooked on this. We really cooked on this. Like, this is such a unique mechanic that these hand traps are. We, dude, I'm just going to talk about it. So basically, I created an archetype, a subtype of hand traps that are level 1 all the way through 6. And the hand traps, the pretty much the premise of these cards is it's a hand trap mini game. So I'm going to explain more as we get into it. But they're called All Right No Dice, which is really cool. So All Right and then an exclamation mark and then no dice. And then every level has a different attribute, and the attribute kind of dictates the typing for the most part. Like for earth, there's a rock. For wind, there's a wing beast. For water, there's an aqua. For fire, there's a pyro. For light, there's a fairy. For dark, there's a dragon. And essentially, the way that these cards work, we're going to talk about it. They're very, very, very cool. So you have to be kind of in a losing position for them to work, but they do work as hand traps. So we're going to explain it the best that we can. So the mechanic for all of these hand traps is basically going to be if your opponent has more total cards than you and their hand are filled. So it's just like Exiton. So if your opponent has 2 cards on their field and 3 cards in their hand, and you have 5 cards in hand, then you can't activate this card. So it's just like Exiton. You have to be in a losing position to activate them. So if your opponent has more total cards than you, basically in their hand are filled, you can discard costs. Your opponent can discard a card to negate this effect. So all of them are going to have this same text right here. You discard them if your opponent has more cards than you, and they can optionally discard a card to negate this effect. The next thing you're going to do is roll a 6-sided die. If the result is 1, which is his level. So all of them, based on their level, the die roll has to land on the star that they have. So for the level 3 Alright No Dice monster, the die has to hit 3. You will get rewarded for actually winning this minigame. The effects get better and better, and they become almost... some of them become like actual hand traps, while some of them just allow you to get advantage. Not all of them are going to be playable in every deck, but the mechanic itself is like the minigame, is pretty much the mini game that the hand traps provide to you. So it gives like a really cool, fun way to interact with your opponent because you're taking a chance. And you will not be fully punished if you, Jesus. You will not be fully punished if you lose the mini game. You pretty much will explain more as we go along. But some of them are going to be better in other decks. Like the Earth one might be better in heavier hand trap decks. And we'll get on more and more to the different Alright No Dice monsters. But the premise of them, again, is your opponent has to have more cards than you. You discard them, and they're all quick effects, so they're all just like, quick effect hand traps. Discard this card. Your opponent can discard a card to negate this effect. Roll a die. If the result is the star, the level of the no dice monster, you will get the following effect. And the text is going to change based on the different ones. So for no dice golem, if the result is 1, special summon this card from your graveyard, then add a Alright No Dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. That text is the same for all of them. The only difference in this is going to be that the result has to be the star. So for Golem, how he special summons himself from your graveyard, then adds an Alright No Dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, all of them are going to have that first text for when the die roll actually lands on the correct number. Now here's his actual effect that differentiates between all the Alright No Dice monsters. Also, add a monster from your graveyard to your hand. So if Alright No Dice Golem, you activate his effect when your opponent has more cards than you, you roll a die and it lands on 1, you special him from your grave, add another Alright No Dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, then you can add a monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this card is not going to be that crazy on his own, and he doesn't really work by himself at all. Pretty much all he can do is just summon himself for free and get another Alright No Dice card if you roll 1. So he's objectively one of the worst one, but as the levels increase, the effects get better. Lastly, the second part, because there's two layers of text to these cards. Their effect is going to be A if the result is 1, and then B if the result's not their level. So we're moving on to the second part of this text. If the result is not 1, you can add a all right no dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except all right no dice golem, or draw 1 card. You can only activate the effect of an all right no dice card thrice per turn. So you get 3 chances to play this minigame and see if you can resolve one of their effects. And so basically there's no punish for if you miss the dice. Like if you miss the dice roll on these cards, there's no punish because you can just add a different copy and try your minigame with a different one. And I will explain more of the mechanics as we get along, because there's actually a numerical like order that you want to go about how you resolve your alright no dice cards, because there's certain ones that actually, as we get later on, certain ones have effects that benefit you if you actually land your dice cards. So all of them basically work that way. You discard them when your opponent has more cards than you. Your opponent can optionally discard a card to negate this effect. That's how you balance out these cards, because they can get better and better. The card attacks will get better. Not to like borderline broken, but definitely it's meant to reward you for winning that 16.5 or 16.8% chance of actually landing the die. So they all work that way. You discard them, roll a die. If it lands on the star, which pretty much the level 2, the die roll has to be 2. The level 5, the die roll has to be 5. You will summon them from the grave, do an effect, add another alright no dice card, and you can only do them thrice per turn. So your opponent can negate these by discarding a card. What's also unique about them is your opponent can Ash Blossom and Ghost Bell and Call by the Grave, and also your opponent can DD Crow some of these cards, because you have to summon them from the grave to be able to resolve the full effect. So if your opponent says, oh, this guy doesn't seem like he has good luck, I'm not going to negate the golem, I'm just going to let him roll a die because he won't land on a 1, they will be punished. However, if you activate alright no dice golem and my opponent decides I don't want to discard any other card in my hand except Crow, so I'm just going to Crow that golem, then the golem can't resolve. If they Ash the golem, it can't resolve. If they Bell the golem, it can't resolve. You cannot resolve the card if you can't summon it back. And because they all add from deck or grave, they can be ashed or belled. You can Crow them or called by them. So they're very, very balanced cards in the sense that there's a lot of counterplay for these cards. On top of the fact that you actually have to land that die roll correctly as like a 16.8% chance. So it's very high risk, high reward. But the punish to these cards is really more so the fact that your opponent has a ton of ways to counterplay them. But outside of that aspect, you won't get punished if you lose the minigame after you try 3 times. Because essentially the way these cards work is you do your first 2 alright no dice cards, and then after you search your third one, if you failed the minigame twice, on your third one, if your third alright no dice card misses, you, again, if the result is not the level of that monster, you can add an alright no dice card from your deck or graveyard with a different name, or draw 1 card. So what I like to do is I like to use my first alright no dice card, and if it misses, I grab a copy of Faerie, which we're going to go over later, and Faerie rewards you for winning the minigame. And if you fail with Faerie, you will lastly add Dragon, which we'll talk about later. That's kind of the sequential order. And if Dragon misses, you will draw 1 card. So essentially, you'll still have 5 cards in hand. Nothing happened to your opponent. You couldn't hand trap them, but you also didn't lose anything. You essentially got a chance to deck then yourself 3 times. I guess actually, yeah, you got to deck then yourself 3 times and draw a potential real hand trap. So there is that aspect that they can be kind of like a upstart goblin on your opponent's turn. That's the worst case scenario. These cards will just be an upstart goblin. But it's a very fun mechanic, and the aspect of these cards is they are supposed to reward you for getting lucky, but not punish you if you don't get so unlucky, because there's such a huge stipulation on when you're able to activate the cards in the first place, and the fact that there's so much counterplay that you do actually want to be able to play the minigame. So we put the card text in these so that every time you draw 1, you do get 3 chances to play the minigame. So we're going to go over the next card now. Let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, 9 minutes in. It's going to be a lot faster now that you guys understand the mechanic. So next up is Alright No Dice Birdy. The card text on all of these are the exact same. Your opponent has more total cards in their hand and field than you do. Discard this card. Your opponent can discard a card to negate this effect. Roll a 6-sided die. If the result is 2, special summon this card from your graveyard. Add an Alright No Dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then Birdy's actual effect, because this effect that I just read you is the same for all of them. They all have the same first and second effect. The only thing that's different, the only one thing that's different about every alright no dice card is the effect if the die roll actually lands on the results of their level. So every single one of them have the same exact card text for the most part, except if they land. So Birdy, their die roll has to hit 2. If Birdy's die roll hits 2, you draw 2 cards and then discard 1 card. This is a wind level 2 wing beast. So what Birdy essentially is going to be good for is in decks that play a lot of non-engine, because this is basically a rescue ace fire attacker. This is like resolving impulse on your opponent's turn. You draw 2 and discard. So it lets you deck in, it lets you potentially see other hand traps. If you're playing like a heavy non-engine deck and you're trying to see your board breakers, Birdy could be a good alright no dice card to pair into your lineup of non-engine that you're playing. Outside of that, it's the same effect. If the result was not 2, you can add an alright no dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except Birdy, draw 1. So every time you miss and you search another alright no dice card, you can't add another copy of the same one. So that's the other thing that balances the mechanic of these cards, is like if you draw a really good one that you want to try and resolve 3 times, you can't search copies of itself off of itself, which forces you to actually, in the terms of deck building, play different alright no dice cards. And we wanted this for custom format so that people can't just min-max and say, oh, I'm just going to trim the fat and only play the best, most broken one and just keep trying its effect. Because 3 chances, for example, at a Birdy, just by having Birdy in hand, it guaranteeing you 3 chances to draw 2. Even though it's a 16.8% chance your opponent can Ash Bell or Curl it and they could just discard a card to negate it, it's still, we just wanted to mitigate any chance that you get 3 attempts at the same card unless you drew multiple alright no dice cards, because your other ones can search more Birdies for you. Birdy just can't search herself. So Golem adds 1 from a monster from grave to hand. Birdy draws 2. And I'm going to remind you one more time, the mechanic, your opponent has to have more total cards in their hand or field than you do. So like, for example, if you activate a Perulia in your opponent's draw phase, you now have 4 cards in hand, they have 5. You can immediately play the dice game in their draw phase if you really want to. And some of these, you're going to want to do it in draw phase before your opponent gets a chance to play, because cards like Birdy lets you draw in a real hand trap so that you can actually hand trap them on their turn before they start playing in their main phase. But if they miss, they will always search a different one or draw 1 card. So they will be upstarts, and the way that you want to do it is use your first alright no dice. If it misses, grab a Faerie. If Faerie misses, grab a Dragon. And if Dragon misses, just draw. Or if you want to, you could just add another alright no dice card and then play the minigame on your turn and try and break their board with your alright no dice cards. They're very flexible in that aspect. So I think we did a very, very good job designing these cards. The next one we're going to talk about is Drippy. So this is the level 3 Aqua. Remember, I told you guys like 4 times what their effects are. So now I'm just going to talk about what they actually do. If Drippy lands on a 3, because he's a level 3, if the die roll is 3 when you activate him, you special him from your grave, add an alright no dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, look at your opponent's entire hand, shuffle 1 card from their hand into their deck, then they draw 1 and discard 1. So Drippy, being a water and a level 3 Aqua, we wanted to give it a semblance of what water decks do. So remember how I talked about earlier how some of these cards are going to be better in other decks. So not every archetype is going to want to play certain alright no dice cards. But the way Drippy works is you actually would want to play him in water. He's not a sea serpent. We didn't want to make him a sea serpent because then you could actually search him in Mermails, which is just kind of be not that cool. But he is a level 3 water, which is unique because Mermails do have a card that actually allows you to search a level 3 water. So Drippy basically lets you hand loop your opponent for 1, but you get full knowledge of their hand. And even though you hand loop them for 1, they will get to actually draw 1, discard 1. So the aspect of Drippy is that he is still going to be a hand loop for 1, but your opponent gets a chance to see a different card while still having to discard 1 card, which makes this card an actual hand loop. We actually thought about making him shuffle 1, and then your opponent draws 1, but we wanted your opponent to actually lose a card for you winning the 16.8% minigame. And so now that we're getting into effects that are better, you now start to understand that there's an aspect to these cards where they're actually still card economy pressure on your opponent, because some of their effects, even though there's that small minuscule chance that you win that minigame, because it's so good, your opponent will say, I don't even want to take a chance at this. I'm going to discard a card, or I'm going to Ash, or I'm going to Bell, or I'm going to Crow. And you got to think about it, when your opponent already starts comboing, there's actually a lot of potential for them having a ton of excess cards that they don't need. So them discarding a card to negate this wouldn't really hurt them that much. Like if you're playing against actual water, they're on a plus fest right now, or you're playing against Ryzeals and they just resolve dual drive. They don't mind discarding one of their spare cards, you know? So this card being negated won't even hurt because your opponent has to start playing the game for you to be able to activate this card. And by that time, they could potentially have a ton of cards that they don't mind discarding to negate this effect. And the cards they discard can actually benefit them because those cards can have graveyard effects. So we factored in a lot of stuff to balance these cards out to make it to where you are rewarded for winning the minigame, but your opponent is not so drastically punished if they basically don't want you to play the minigame, or even if you win the minigame. So yeah, Drippy is a pretty crazy card. It's the first actual like good one that people would want to say I play 3 of this. Birdy draw 2 discard on your opponent's turn is objectively okay. I think this is one of the ones where you'd want to search it on your opponent's turn as your 3rd effect so that you can start your turn with potentially drawing 2, which is going to net you a huge plus. So very good cards. So that's Drippy. Again, all the effects are the exact same. The only difference with them is when their die roll lands. So again, they all summon themselves from grave, they all add another alright no dice card, and then they do an effect. If they miss, they all add a different alright no dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, or draw 1. So that's Drippy hand loops. Next we're going to talk about the level 4, which is Burner Boy. All that I'm going to talk about now is his actual effect. Another aspect of him I forgot to mention is Golem starts as 1,000 attack. Every time the level goes up on an alright no dice monster, the attack increases by 500. So Birdy's 15, Golem's 1,000, Drippy's 2k, which actually is really good because these are hand traps that in the worst case, you could just normal summon them in their beat sticks. But also because they summon themselves when they win the minigame, you get free beaters on your opponent's turn. After you benefit yourself, win the minigame, you start with free bodies as well. So they're kind of like Bestials. When you think of it that way, they're like bodies that you could put out on your opponent's turn. Burner Boy's effect, basically, if you win the minigame, you summon him, add an alright no dice card, then destroy, non-targeting, destroy a monster on the field, kind of like Ghost Ogre in a different way. And if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. There is no time in the custom format, so this will never be a toxic card in that aspect. You can never win in time with this because time's just not a factor. In custom format, it's turns. So turn 0, 1, 2, 3. Turn 3 is the last turn. That's how it works. Because we want custom format to actually be enjoyable. So Burner Boy pops a monster and then burns. And keep in mind, I read their first and second effects like 5 times now because I really want you guys to like not be confused. And he's at 2,500 attack because he's a level 4. He gained 3 levels, so that's plus 1,500 from the baseline stat that Golem has. Now moving forward to the actual best one, in my opinion, Drippy is probably one of the better ones too. But as you can see, like for example, if you're playing like Volcanics or a deck like that that likes to pop and burn, like Burner Boy could be a 3-up for your strat, but some of the other ones might not. And that's what's cool about the alright no dice cards is they benefit different strategies in a different way. So it depends on the playstyle of your deck that will determine which alright no dice cards you want to actually fit into your deck. Faerie, I think, is an auto 3-of if you're playing any alright no dice strat, unless maybe you're on Impulse or something. Faerie's effect is very unique. So all their effects are the exact same, except for this. It's different results based on the level. So if you roll a 5 off of Faerie, you get to summon her from your grave, add an alright no dice card from your deck or grave to your hand, then return a monster on the field to the hand. And if you do, the next alright no dice effect you activate will resolve both its first and second effect. So here's what we're going to talk about with Faerie. She is the card that rewards you the most for winning the minigame. Because if you land with Faerie once, that means your next alright no dice card, whether you land the result hits their level or not, you will get their effect. So like if you resolve Faerie, you can bounce any monster, including a copy of herself, which is very unique about her. Because you could win the minigame with Faerie, bounce a copy of herself, and then activate Faerie again, and then win the minigame with Faerie, bounce a copy of herself, and your last effect can just be guaranteed. Which is very cool, because she basically lets you net pluses. Like, you'll resolve Faerie, add a different alright no dice, bounce a copy of herself back, activate Faerie, win the game guaranteed because you already hit the 5, add another copy of an alright no dice card, bounce her back, and then do your third one as whatever one you want it to be. or you can actually just bounce a monster on the field. So she is a disruption. So Faerie and Burner Boy are actual disruptions, while Drippy kind of just lets you net information and potentially take a card from your opponent. Faerie and Burner Boy are like actual disruptions. They're like actual hand traps. And what's really cool about her mechanic, again, is she can bounce herself to keep playing the minigame with just her. Or you could resolve her, bounce one of your opponent's threatening monsters, and then you can add the next card that we're going to talk about, which is Dragon, which is the worst one to draw next to like Golem, because basically its effect doesn't work really on its own. Like it can work on its own, which is kind of cool, but it's like the worst one because the whole premise of this card is it's supposed to be the final boss. It's supposed to be the card that you activate last. It's supposed to be the third card you activate at the end of the minigame. So basically, Baby Dragon is like the end of the minigame. This is how you know that the minigame's over, because you're activating Dragon, because it's supposed to be your third one. Faerie has 3,000 attack, by the way, because she's a level 5. So she gained 4 levels, so she gained 2,000 from the baseline stat of 1,000 of Golem. And then we have the level 6 Dark Dragon, which is Baby Dragon. His effect, if the die roll lands on 6, summon him from grave, add an alright no dice card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, then you can destroy cards on the field equal to the number of alright no dice card effects activated this turn. This card is essentially a board wipe for 3. If somehow miraculously you're in a weird game state where both you and your opponent are playing mini games on the same turn, whoever resolves Dragon gets the edge, because they'll be able to pop potentially 6 cards. Now, the downside to Baby Dragon is the same downside to all the alright no dice cards. Your opponent can be very clever and just say, I'm not going to respond to any alright no dice card except Baby Dragon because it's the only one that threatens me. So you can get very unlucky on your first 2 alright no dice games, and then your third one's Dragon, and they could just say, oh, you might actually land the 6. I'm just going to negate this. I'll ash it. I'll just discard a card. And basically what happens now is you're neg 1. You have 4 cards in hand now. You actually lost a card, but the balance aspect to that is your opponent lost a card too. So you both basically just discard a card and nothing happens. So again, the balance of these cards is like you can really try the minigame and your opponent can just stop you and you won't be able to play. You can only activate the effect of an alright no dice card thrice per turn. You only get 3 chances to play the minigame. And if you whiff on the first 2, the third one, your opponent can just negate it. Because the third one should always be Dragon. Because Dragon is going to pop cards equal to the number of alright no dice card effects activated that turn. So that's why you actually, if you play any alright no dice package in your deck, Dragon should be at least a one of that you play. Because Dragon is the most rewarding card for the end of the game. And so now that we've went over all the effects and you guys understand how these cards work, the dynamic of how you use these cards is basically, if you start with any alright no dice that's not Faerie, and it whiffs, even if it doesn't whiff, if it actually lands, the second card you want to add is Faerie. That's the strategic manner of how you do these cards. And the reason being is because when Faerie lands, Faerie guarantees that Dragon will not whiff. And that's how you want to do it. You go for whichever one you go, and then Faerie into Dragon. You should always be leveling up from Faerie into Dragon. Because even if Faerie whiffs and she doesn't land the 5, you add the Dragon, and if the Dragon lands, then you still get a chance to pop 3. But Faerie, pretty much, the aspect of these cards is like, you get one bonus, like one like actual like non-Faerie effect, like you draw 2 or rip 1 or pop. And then your second, if you're actually really lucky and you win the minigame 3 times, you should be able to draw 2, pop 1, or hand loop for 1, and then resolve Faerie to compulse your own card or your opponent's card, and then guarantee Dragon to pop 3. So these cards can be like very broken when they actually resolve. Like you can get a lot of pluses, but also just keep in mind that your opponent could just wait till you get Dragon and then just discard a card and negate it, and then they don't do anything. So like in the very, very worst of all cases, your opponent could just discard a card, which means you just basically hand loop them for 1. So these cards will always be a minimum of either a 1 upstart goblin, or your opponent basically, we just Dark World Dealings. We both discard a card. I discard my Dragon, you discard a random. And your other hand traps can still work. So that's pretty much it. That's all the alright no dice is. We really worked we put a lot of work into this. And again, he's 3,500 attack as a level 6. Because it's 525 plus the baseline of 1,000. That's the unique mechanic. Also, is every time you level up in your alright no dice game, they do gain more attack. because the idea is you're supposed to be rewarded more and more as you continue to play the game and level up, so they get stronger and their effects technically get better. Even though Drippy's a level 3, and sometimes most people would argue and say Drippy's the best one, I think that it's debatable. I do think that Faerie and Drippy could be staples in most decks, but I could also see decks really enjoying Birdy and Burner Boy. And Dragon, I just think should always be a one of. You could start with him to play your minigame, but I think if you're healthy on your ratios, that Dragon should just be a one of, because you can always add them from grave to hand anyways. But yeah, that's the aspect of these cards. That is pretty much all we have for the custom card hand traps. We don't know if we want to make more hand traps for a custom format, but we do. I'm very, very proud with the results of how this went. I think that this is one of, if not, in my opinion, I think these are actually the coolest hand traps that have ever been printed. I don't think that you could make a better kind of unique mechanic, because like what Charmies and Bestials did as hand traps is they introduced a different dynamic and mechanic to the game of how to play around them, and when you're playing into them, the game state completely alters. And so it's not like Asher Veiler where your opponent activates an effect and you just straight up negate it. Like, we didn't want to make more hand traps that were just hard negates. There's enough. Imperm, Bell, Ash, Veiler, those are hard negates. You already have enough hand traps that can one-for-one trade. We wanted a hand trap that makes the game more fun, introduces a unique dynamic, and also essentially that it's very, very balanced, and there's not that much of a drawback if you lose the minigame or if your opponent just chooses to turn it off for you. So yeah. Another thing that we can talk about really fast is what's cool about these is if you draw 2 Alright No Dice cards, because sometimes your opponent might just stop you in the very beginning because they don't want you to play the minigame at all. They could like discard a card to negate Drippy, and then you could just have like a Birdy or something, and then Birdy can get you back into Drippy, and then they'll be forced to basically discard 2. So what that also means is like that specific aspect means the way you approach and navigating through the Alright No Dice cards is you should never discard to negate the first or even the second effect. At the offset chance they have a third one and it lands, you should always, if you want to participate in the minigame, because your opponent gets to participate in the minigame by basically just stopping you by discarding a card. If your opponent wants to participate, they should only participate on the third effect. What that also means is, unfortunately, sometimes you will win the minigame on your first roll, and you'll be benefited. So there's a lot of like, it's like playing around Nibiru, and then Nibiru's bad, and then you play into Nibiru, and Nibiru's good. It's like there's so much that it introduces to the game where like, it really can be such a cool, clever mind game where the ruse is like, you want to stop the third effect, it's like you want to stop the dual drive, but if you don't negate the X, it's full combo anyways. Like, sometimes it'll be like that with the minigame, but like always the thing that's gonna continually be the probably biggest design flaw of these cards is that you have to get really lucky and roll that specific 1 out of 6 die roll. Like, you can only land a 5. It can land on 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 6 before it lands on 5. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I appreciate you. Leave the comments in the comment section below. Definitely let us know your opinion. Keep in mind, if you want to critique these cards, there's really nothing else that we're going to do to change these. These are as perfectly balanced and also beneficial as they can be. So if you just have other ideas for hand traps, I would definitely love to incorporate that and possibly make cards out of it. But I think this is exactly how it should be. The Alright No Dice minigame hand traps are coming into custom format, and we don't know if any of them are going to get hit on the ban list, because like, for these cards to get hit, somebody would literally have to have like loaded dice. Because I tested them last night for an hour or so, and I really got unlucky. I only won the minigame off Drippy specifically like twice. I don't know why DB was letting Drippy hit 3, but I didn't hit anything else except like 2 Drippies and 1 Faerie in an hour of playing with these cards. So I don't know. Some people might get luckier in real life, but on DB, it seems like we're very unlucky with the die rolls. So I was just basically getting upstarts. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much. Deuces.